Jasma, and today I'm here with another galette recipe. You guys really liked that apple almond galette that I made a while back, and personally I did too. So in spirit of it being summertime and peaches being in season, I'm here to make a peach and pistachio galette. The flavor combinations of this galette is just so refreshing, and I also topped it off with some fresh raspberries to add a nice and sour kick. Let's get started. First things first, I'm going to make my pie crust. I like to laminate my pie crust because it just adds extra flakiness and I think it just gives it a better texture. So I have my all-purpose flour here, and to that I'm going to add my nutmeg. You can also use cinnamon. Then also add in the salt and white sugar and just mix everything until it's combined. Whenever there's pastry involved, people will always tell you that the temperature is key and you need to make sure everything stays super cold. So I just took my cubed butter out of the freezer. I like to prepare this before I measure all of my other ingredients and then just keep it in there for about 5 minutes. It should not be rock hard because you still need to be able to cut it into the dough, but it should be very, very cold. So add that to the dry ingredients and mix it around just so the butter is coated in flour. Then I'm going to use a pastry cutter to begin cutting my butter. It's better to use a tool like this instead of your hands because then you won't risk melting the butter. Once you feel that the butter is all around the same size, add in the ice cold water. This amount of water is only going to hydrate the flour. It won't allow it to form a dough, so do not add any excess water. The flour is pretty much all hydrated. There are no more super dry bits of flour and just everything has become shaggy. So now I'm going to place this back into the fridge for at least 10 minutes. You can also do the freezer for around 5 minutes if you want to speed it up. And this is important because after working the dough and kind of mixing everything together, the butter will have softened. And if we go straight to laminating from here, the butter will kind of just meld into the flour layers and your pastry won't be as flaky in the end. So we need to refrigerate this for everything to become super cold again, and then we're going to work on the laminating. If you've never laminated anything before, I recommend watching my previous galette video where I explain why we do this and how laminating actually works. After chilling the dough, flip everything out onto your work surface. It's still going to be very crumbly, do not worry, and we're going to begin laminating this. The first part of this process is simply using a rolling pin to flatten down the mixture until it forms a cohesive dough. So just press everything and then fold the mixture over itself so that you can bring it back together, and then use your hands to press everything tightly. Then repeat this 3 to 4 times until it forms a dough. So now flour your work surface and we can begin creating the layers. Roll out this dough into a long rectangle. It should be able to hold its shape now, and we're going to fold both ends inwards. Don't let the two flaps overlap, you just want it to meet in the middle. Press it all together, rotate by 90 degrees, and repeat this process 4 to 5 times. If at any point you feel like the dough is becoming way too soft and the butter is melting, pop it back into the fridge until it's cold again and then continue. Make sure you're not overdoing this step as well. I like to stick to around 4 or 5 of these rolling, folding, and rotating sequences, because if you overdo this, what you're doing is basically kneading the butter into the dough, and then there's really no point in laminating because the layers won't exist. At the very end of this, the dough should be quite smooth, there are no more crumbly edges, so we can wrap this up in some plastic wrap, and I also like to flatten everything down with my rolling pin further just so it's all nice and compact. Now into the fridge for this to chill for about half an hour to an hour, and in the meantime we're going to prepare the filling. On to making the Pistachio Frangipane, or it's kind of like a pistachio cream. It's going to be the filling underneath the peach inside of the galette. I'm going to be using homemade ground pistachios. You can also buy them pre-made, but it's really easy to do yourself. So I just toasted my pistachios inside of a 400 degrees Fahrenheit oven for around 7 minutes. And even though when you toast your pistachios, they do become more of a brown color instead of a really bright green one, I still like to do this because it has a nicer scent and it becomes more flavorful. Then place it into a food processor or blender to pulse until it becomes a sandy ground texture. It's important when you're doing this to not overdo it. As soon as it becomes the texture you want, you need to stop mixing, or else the pistachios will turn into kind of a nut butter, because the more you mix it, the more oil it releases. So that's my ground pistachios. Now I'm going to make the frangipane by hand because it's such a small amount, but you can also use an electric mixer. So in my bowl here, I have my softened unsalted butter. Then add your white sugar and begin mixing it together. I like to start with a spatula to press the butter into the sugar and then whip some air into it using a whisk. This recipe doesn't require a whole egg, so I'm beating an egg and then measuring out the amount that I need, and then add this straight into the butter sugar mixture and mix until combined. Then finally incorporate the all-purpose flour along with the ground pistachios to form a paste. And that's the frangipane. I'm just gonna keep this covered and at room temperature so that it stays soft. And now we're gonna go on to preparing the peach filling. So I have my 4 peaches here. They're very ripe. So I'm going to begin slicing them up. When it comes to peaches, I like to slice them just a little bit thicker and almost like a wedge. Peaches break a lot more easily since they're so soft, and since we're gonna have to coat stuff around it later, I like to make it thicker so it isn't as fragile. Add your all-purpose flour, sugar, lemon juice, and salt into the sliced peaches, then very gently stir it around to coat. Once there are no more dry bits of flour, set the peach filling aside, and we are now ready to assemble the galette. So take that chilled pie dough out of the fridge and place it onto a floured surface. Then we're going to roll this out into a circle. To turn a square into a circle, you want to start by flattening all 4 corners, which leaves a little mound on each of those sides. You want to roll these mounds outwards, and this is going to round off those flat edges. Once you do this to all 4 sides, it's going to round off the entire dough into more of a circular shape. Then if you just keep rolling it out bigger and bigger, it's going to turn into a nice and large circular piece of dough. Once the dough is about ½ centimeter thick, we're going to dust both sides with some all-purpose flour and then slide a piece of reusable baking paper or parchment paper underneath this dough. Then spoon on your pistachio frangipane onto the center and flatten it out. Be sure to leave a little space from the edges though, because we will be needing to fold the sides inwards to close off the galette. Now for the peaches, I like to arrange mine in a really organic wavy pattern and have them standing up, so I push them a little bit into the pistachio filling, but there are plenty of different ways how you can arrange the peach slices and fill up the galette. Since my peaches were super ripe, a lot of the smaller pieces did kind of, crumble like this. So the trick is to take out the good ones first and pile them in the middle. And then all the broken ones you can just arrange on the edges, since you're gonna, cover it with the pie crust anyways, you won't see any of that. So now to close up the galette, you want to fold up the dough and ruffle it so that it is nice and secure. Since we slid the pastry onto the baking paper before I assembled, it is going to be a lot easier to just transfer it straight on. I'm going to pop this in the freezer for just about 10 minutes so everything can firm up before I bake it. I find that the pastry holds its shape a lot better when I do that. So in the meantime, I'm gonna begin preheating my oven. Once ready to go, I'm making some quick egg wash using that leftover egg from the frangipane filling and brushing it all over the crust. Then send it off into your preheated oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. It takes about 30 minutes for my galette to cook, but depending on the size and thickness of yours, the time will vary. Now that the galette is done baking, I'm going to let it cool so that everything sets a little bit, and I'm going to transfer it to a serving platter. This is a cake lifter. You don't need it, but it guarantees that nothing is going to break when you transfer it around. So if you ever get stressed out like me using just a single offset spatula, I'd recommend getting one. So once I've effortlessly transferred my galette, I topped it with some fresh raspberries and some crushed pistachios. You can also throw in some mint leaves or ice cream, whatever you want. And that's it with this recipe. I truly love the flavor of this peach and pistachio galette. Everything just goes so well together. Thanks so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you feel like it, and I hope to see you next time.